You know what you call people that hang out with musicians? Drummers. Drummers hate that joke. I got a million of them. A lot of them I can't tell on here, but we'll have
tell the clean ones. Let's hear more. Come on, let's go.
Have a little a musician's joke session sometime soon, because some of them are really, really bad. You know how many bass players it takes to screw in a light bulb?
No.
They don't have to. The keyboard player does it with his left hand. That's one of my favorite ones.
Well, I mean, just think of development of music.
If people implement it properly, it's going to be a blessing.
Right. I mean, it's just another tool. But anyway, talk about a bass player. When I watched Woodstock, the film, I mean, I wasn't at Woodstock, but the film about Woodstock, which was 1969. And what was going through my mind, maybe a bizarre thought process, but there's a bass guitar on all those bands. They all had a bass guitar that was being played in those bands. And that instrument had only been invented, 15 years before that?
You know, I'm not really given that much thought, but you're right. The electric bass.
There was no pedagogy. I mean, where you have to develop the rules and I think the sophisticated term, they call it pedagogy, for an instrument. I mean, it's a whole different instrument than an upright bass. I mean, some people play both. They're both bass. But the function, how to play them, and how they function in a band, I feel is, you tell me if you agree or disagree.
Well, it's blowing to me sitting here thinking about it, because I never thought about that, really. I mean, when Woodstock happened, solid body guitar and the electric bass were less than 20 years old.
Absolutely. We were talking 2000. You know, Nirvana was long gone by 2000. And if you look back to 2000, it doesn't seem that long ago.
Sure.
Or maybe even 2005. Is 2005 that ancient of music? Not really. So, you know, all of that, I mean, that guitar had become, and bass had become, I mean, it radically changed music, the electrification of it. And all these amp companies, you know, the Marshall stacks, you see the rolls of the Marshall stacks. That company wasn't even 10 years old, well, I don't know the history of it when they actually started, but where Marshall was Marshall, that they actually, they didn't start making 62 maybe, that they actually have started to have a need for them.
Right.
And these are guitar players said, I need more power. Okay, you had 50 watts. And then I had 100 watts, and you just keep more power, need more power. And the Voxes would go into flames on stage and burn up, and crazy times in the 60s. And that was only culminated, really, in a way, kind of end of an era, 1969. And all that stuff really had less than 10 years to develop. And it was fully formed by 1969.
My favorite music ever is from that era.
Yeah. And all of that came about in such a short period of time. I mean, that just always blows my mind. But I don't know why the electric guitar, I mean, I'm a guitarist primarily, but for some reason I was fascinated with the whole bass thing, because these people are up there playing their bass guitar, and it was like a brand new, how do they even know how to do it? What were the practices? Who taught them how to play?
That's why it was so good. They didn't. The learning is in the process. That's the whole thing. They didn't know what they were doing. They were just banging around figuring it out. I mean, think about bass techniques. What has developed since the 60s?
Nothing really.
Like ant whistle and like the thunder bass thing.
Well, okay, you got the popping and the
Bootsy was doing that in the 60s.
Was he?
Sure. James Brown. Yeah. I think it was all pretty much, when it comes to something that requires facility, it had all run its course by 69. It had all already been done pretty much. And arguably it had all been done with the guitar as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, you got Halen, came along and made the tapping thing. He didn't invent it. He was always clear to say that he did not invent it, but he really streamlined it and perfected it. That was one innovation, you have to say, came about. And people have gotten faster. I mean, there are shredders, that can cover. Speed has been elevated. There are people who can play it, substantially faster notes per second.
They can play it faster than you can hear.
So for the facility, as far as that goes, shredding has continued to advance, I feel, on guitar anyway.
Yeah, there's been some innovative stuff happen since, but you can argue the point that nobody's picked up the ball and moved it since Hendrix.
Well, I agree with you. Hendrix is one of my big three pillars, but you'll hear a lot of, especially younger folks, saying there's got to be somebody who's better since. I mean, I remember having this conversation with a friend who's probably about your age, and he just wasn't hearing it. He was not going to hear it. that that Hendrix is the best guitar. There's got to be people since that are better.
Well, he's the most innovative. Necessity, you know, he was using sun amps, and they kind of made the Marshalls for him, the bigger ones, the 100-watt ones, because he was tired of blowing up the speakers in his sun amplifiers.